Hi there, and welcome to Lesson 2 of Electromagnets. In this lesson, we'll be discussing radiation and insulation in regards to thermal energy. Our keywords here are infrared, vacuum, reflection, and absorption. Please take a moment to complete the first knowledge check of this lesson, and we'll take it up in just a moment. Alright, now that you're finished, let's take it up. Describe the state of matter where particles are set in rows. The state of matter where the particles are neatly set, of course, will be solids, as they are not able to move around freely. Question 2. Convection happens in which? Solid, liquid, or gas? Convection happens in anything that has a fluid state. This would be a liquid or a gas in which the particles are able to flow. 3. Describe the direction in which heat flows. Heat flows from hot to cold, or a high temperature to a low temperature. 4. State the energy stored in a vibrating particle. As we're describing the movement of the particle in which it is vibrating, it has to be kinetic energy. Remember that kinetic energy refers to the movement. 5. Describe the movement of solid particles. Solid particles are vibrating in place. 6. Why do heated fluids rise? Well, this refers to our last lesson in which we described convection. Heated fluids rise because when something increases in temperature, there's an increased volume because the particles are moving further and further away and expanding. The increased volume then lowers the density, meaning that the newly heated fluids will be able to rise over and float on top of the non-heated fluids. 7. Which of these is the best conductor, metal or plastic? Metal is the best conductor of heat, as it can actually transfer through the thermal energy without melting. 8. Name the method of heat transfer in solids. In solids, we call this conduction. Please take a moment to green pen in any answers that you have left blank or correct answers as you see fit. In this lesson, we'll be describing heat radiation as well as insulation methods and what insulation actually refers to. As we know, space is mostly a vacuum. This means that there are no particles in space at all. In conduction, vibrating particles must pass the thermal energy along the rows of particles. In convection, the fluid particles become less dense and rise. So, how is heat transferred from the sun to Earth if there are no particles to pass on vibrations or to flow? The answer is the heat must be transferred by another method. This method is called heat radiation. The heat is radiated by waves called infrared waves. These are waves just like light, but our eye cannot detect them. All objects emit some infrared, even ice. So, think about your homes. Most homes use what we call a radiator to help heat them. What these objects actually do is they take in and store thermal energy and slowly release it through heat radiation. Yes, the metal itself is able to conduct that thermal energy, but it isn't until it's radiated out in which we start to feel the thermal energy. Another example of heat radiation is a hot cup of tea. We can tell that a cup would be hot before even making physical contact with it. That's because there is a layer of infrared radiation around the cup itself after it is poured. So, please watch this. So next, I would like you to please watch this video about the absorption of heat. It'll be linked in the description section below and describes how color affects heat radiation. But moving forward, let's look at insulation. To conserve heat energy in our houses, coffee cups, etc., we need to insulate to reduce the amount of heat loss through radiation. Insulation is used to reduce conduction, convection, and radiation. The way that insulation reduces conduction is to reduce the vibrations being transferred through air gaps. This gives gaps between rows of particles so the vibrations are not passed on. And this is achieved in a house, for example, using cavity wall insulation such as mineral wool or foam, or in a coffee cup by using corrugated cardboard. Think about if you have a crawl space or an attic. If you have a crawl space or a loft, you can see that in these gaps between your house and the roof, or your house and the basement, there is almost this wool-like substance. This is mineral wool or foam, and this helps insulate your houses. By doing so, it allows less thermal energy to escape during the winter, as well as less heat energy to enter during the summers. Insulation also helps to reduce convection, and this simply stops the fluid from rising. It is achieved using a barrier to prevent the fluid from rising in the first place. In a house, the ceiling does this using loft insulation as well. Or, when we think of a coffee cup, that is the purpose of the lid. Lastly, reducing radiation. Typically, we use a reflective surface such as silver on the inside of a vacuum flask, or if you think about cars in the summer, many people place a silver lining on their windscreen to prevent sunlight from entering the car and heating it up as well. So, for the learning activity for this lesson, please watch this video on the effects of insulation. There is a clip found in the description section below on reducing heat loss. Once you finish watching the clip, now that you're finished, let's take it up. Identify the method of heat loss in fluids. The heat loss is called convection, or the transfer of thermal energy through convection. 2. Identify the method of heat transfer from the sun to the earth. This is done through radiation. Question 3. Identify the best emitter of radiation. The best emitter is silver. 4. Identify the best absorber of radiation. It is the color black, as of course black represents the entire spectrum of visible light, so it can absorb all of the different colors of light. 5. Identify the worst absorber of radiation. This would of course be, as it is a reflective color and reflects most of the radiation. And 6. Identify the worst emitter of radiation. Of course, this is the color black, as it is more focused on absorbing the colors rather than emitting them. 7. State what can be used to reduce conduction. We can reduce conduction by leaving gaps for the air to pass, and this means that the solid particles would not be able to pass on the vibrations and thermal energy. 8. State what can be used to reduce radiation. Typically, we use something that is reflective, like a silver screen behind a windscreen in a car. 9. Why are marathon runners wrapped in silver blanket at the end of the race? Well, this relates to why we use a silver screen in our cars. The silver blanket helps to reduce the amount of heat radiation they will absorb being in the sun. As they're already at a high internal body temperature from physical exertion, we want to reduce the amount of extra heat they take and help cool down their bodies. 10. Why do we not get frost after a cloudy night? The reason is that clouds act almost like an insulator in the loft of your house. It prevents the heat from escaping, and therefore, the ground level is not cool enough to develop frost. Lastly, 11. Why are radiators painted white and not black? The reason, of course, is we want the heat to be emitted and not absorbed. So, thank you for listening to this lesson, and we'll see you in the next one.